The story is framed as a confession told late in life. An elderly man named Paul Edgecomb sits in a nursing home, quietly carrying a memory he's never been able to set down. He's lived too long, seen too much, and when he finally begins to talk, it's not to impress anyone. It's to explain what happened back when he was a younger man working as a correctional officer on death row in 1930s Louisiana, on a block the guards called the Green Mile, named for the green-painted floor prisoners walked on their last trip to the execution room. Back then, Paul runs the block with a steady hand and a quiet sense of decency. His team includes the dependable Brutus, Brutal Howell, the kind-hearted Harry Terwilliger, and the practical Dean Stanton. Over them all is the warden Hal Moores, a man who wants order and reputation and who trusts Paul to keep both. The weak link is Percy Wetmore, a cruel young guard protected by family connections, the kind of person who mistakes authority for permission. Percy doesn't just do the job badly, he enjoys the suffering the job puts within reach. The block already holds men waiting for death. One of them is Arlen Bitterbuck, quiet and resigned, who seems to accept his fate with a calm that makes the guards uncomfortable. Another is Edouard Delacroix, a Cajun man with a nervous smile and a fragile hopefulness he tries to protect. Dell's small comfort becomes a mouse he befriends, later named Mr. Jingles, and watching this condemned man train a tiny creature to do tricks creates a strange, painful contrast, tenderness living right next to the machinery of execution. Then the new prisoner arrives and the entire balance of the block shifts. John Coffey is brought in chained and towering, a massive black man convicted of murdering two little girls. On paper, he's a monster. In person, he's gentle, frightened, and soft-spoken with a childlike way of looking at the world. He cries easily. He asks permission for simple things. And from the moment Paul meets him, something doesn't fit. Coffey doesn't act like a killer, and the longer Paul watches him, the more that mismatch becomes impossible to ignore. Paul is dealing with his own private misery at the same time. He's suffering from a severe urinary infection that leaves him in constant pain, trying to do his job while his body punishes him with every step. Coffey notices, not in a clever way but in a direct, almost intuitive way, like he can feel pain in the air. In a moment that Paul can't explain or rationalize, Coffey reaches through the bars, touches him, and takes the pain away. Paul experiences an instant, shocking relief, like something poisonous has been pulled out of him. Coffey then releases a cloud of strange, dark particles from his mouth, as if he's expelled what he removed. Paul is left standing there with a body that suddenly feels normal and a mind that has no category for what just happened. That impossible moment isn't a one-off. Coffey's presence keeps revealing something unnatural, something miraculous and terrifying. When Delacroix's mouse, Mr. Jingles, is deliberately harmed by Percy in an act of petty cruelty, Coffey heals the creature with the same eerie tenderness, bringing it back as if the injury never happened. The guards, who have spent their careers thinking they understand what life and death look like, start to behave differently around Coffey. They lower their voices. They watch more carefully. They argue less about procedure and more about conscience. The death row routine, though, doesn't pause for wonder. Executions are still scheduled, the rules are still rules, and the Green Mile remains a place where men walk toward death while others make sure the straps are tight. When Bitterbuck is executed, the process is grim and efficient, emphasizing how normal this has become for the institution. But Percy's cruelty keeps escalating, and it becomes clear he's not just unpleasant, he's dangerous. He wants to hurt someone, and the uniform makes him feel untouchable. Then a new inmate arrives who turns the block volatile. William Wild Bill Wharton. He's loud, unpredictable, and vicious, the kind of man who fills a room with threat even when he's smiling. He mocks the guards, torments the other inmates, and pushes every boundary he can find. Where Coffey radiates fear and empathy, Wharton radiates appetite, like the whole world exists to entertain him. Outside the prison, Paul's life includes the one place he can soften, home with his wife Jan Edgecomb. Through her we see Paul as more than a uniform. He's a decent man trying to do a job that erodes decency. That erosion becomes personal when Warden Moore's wife, Melinda Moores, becomes gravely ill with a brain tumor. The illness is brutal and humiliating, and it turns their home life into a slow collapse. Paul and the guards, now fully aware of Coffey's strange ability, begin to consider the unthinkable, using a condemned man's miracle to save an innocent woman. To do it, they have to break the law, risk their jobs, and gamble everything on trust. They plan an unauthorized transfer, smuggling Coffey out of the prison under cover of night, driving him to the Moor's home while the world sleeps. The tension in that sequence isn't just about getting caught, it's about what it means to ask for grace from someone society has already decided to kill. In the bedroom, Coffey takes on Melinda's sickness the way he took Paul's pain. He trembles, he struggles. Then he releases the dark cloud again, and Melinda wakes up, suddenly clear, alive, and furious like a storm, her personality surging back into place. It's a miracle, but it comes with a terrible side effect. Coffey is overwhelmed afterward, as if absorbing that much suffering is suffocating him from the inside. When Coffey releases the sickness he took from Melinda, it doesn't just disappear. It's transferred, pushed outward, and it lands in Percy. For a while, Percy becomes eerily calm, almost empty, like his mind has been switched off. The guards don't yet understand what that means, but they can feel that the atmosphere around Coffey is changing. Coffey isn't only healing. He's also absorbing truth, pain, and darkness in a way that seems to leave a residue. The block's next execution is Delacroix's, and Percy is supposed to do a simple, crucial part of the process, wetting the sponge used in the electric chair. That sponge is meant to conduct electricity properly, to make the end as quick as possible. In a final act of sadism, Percy forgets, leaving it dry. The execution becomes a nightmare, prolonged, agonizing, and visibly wrong. The guards are forced to watch a man burn and suffer because one petty coward wanted to feel powerful. It's the moment when the job stops being morally complicated and becomes morally unbearable. Paul and the others are furious, sickened, and filled with the kind of rage that doesn't fade when the room goes quiet. Afterward, Coffey makes it clear he knows more than he should. He understands things he hasn't been told. He speaks about the murdered girls he was convicted of killing, and he doesn't describe the crime with pride or detachment. He describes it like a wound. He also seems to recognize something in Wharton, something rotten and familiar. When Wharton is brought near him, Coffey reacts as if he's being forced to breathe poison. Paul begins to suspect the truth he's been avoiding. Coffey might not just be innocent, he might be the victim of a mistake so catastrophic it can't be undone. Coffey proves it in the only way he can. He uses his ability not just to heal but to reveal. He shows Paul a vision of what happened to the girls. Wharton committed the murders and Coffey found them afterward, trying desperately to save them, holding them when it was already too late. That's why Coffey was caught with blood on him. He wasn't the killer, he was a man arriving at the worst moment of his life, trying to reverse the irreversible. Paul now knows the truth and it destroys him, because truth doesn't automatically change outcomes inside a system designed to move forward no matter what. At the same time, the residue Coffey pushed into Percy finally turns into action. Percy, still in a strange trance, is placed in front of Wharton. In a moment that feels like fate twisting a knife, Percy shoots Wharton dead. Then Percy's mind seems to shatter entirely. He collapses into a vacant silence, removed from the world like a man whose soul has stepped out of his body. It's not justice in any clean, satisfying sense, but it is consequence. An ugly return of violence to the hands that kept seeking it. Now Paul faces the hardest choice of his life. He could try to expose the truth and risk being crushed by the system before anything changes, or he could attempt something even more desperate, help Coffey escape. But Coffey refuses. He tells Paul quietly and simply that he's tired. Not tired like someone who needs rest, tired like someone who can't keep absorbing the world's cruelty without breaking. He describes the constant noise of people's pain, the hatred, the meanness, the way it fills the air. He says he can't go on living in a world that hurts so many and learns so little. And he says something that lands like a stone in Paul's chest. He's afraid of the dark, not because he's weak, but because he's still human underneath the miracle. So the execution proceeds, even though everyone involved now knows it's wrong. The ritual is performed with a gentleness that almost makes it worse. The guards do their jobs with trembling hands and wet sponges, trying to offer dignity where dignity can't fix anything. Coffey walks the green floor calmly, and in his final moments he accepts the end like someone choosing to stop carrying a burden that was never meant for one person. The electric chair ends his life, and the people tasked with killing him are left alive with the knowledge of what they've done. The story returns to old Paul in the nursing home, and we learn the last haunting consequence of Coffey's touch. Paul has lived far beyond a normal lifespan, aging slowly, outlasting friends, outlasting loved ones, outlasting the era that shaped him. It isn't portrayed as a gift, it's portrayed as a lonely sentence. He watches the world change while carrying the same memory, the same moral injury year after year. Even Mr. Jingles lives unusually long, a small, living reminder of the miracle that once walked the Green Mile. In the end, the film isn't just about a prison or an execution. It's about what happens when something good and innocent is swallowed by a system that can't admit it made a mistake, and what it does to the people who see the truth too late. Paul doesn't tell the story to prove he was a good man. He tells it because he's still trying to understand how a miracle could exist in a place built for endings, and why when it mattered most, goodness wasn't enough to save the one person who deserved saving.